Chapter 18. In the quiet confines of her heart, Lillian felt the heavy mantle of secrecy settle upon her shoulders, a burden that grew more cumbersome with each passing day. The truth of her love for Ethan, entwined with the shadows of her mother's past, cast a long and haunting silhouette over her life. As she navigated the treacherous waters of her emotions, she became not merely a participant in her story, but its reluctant keeper, a guardian of truths that could fracture the fragile bonds of family. The sun had begun its descent, draping the world in hues of gold and crimson, casting a warm glow over her small room. Lillian sat at her desk, her journal open before her, the pages blank yet full of potential. She longed to pour forth her thoughts, to unburden her soul onto the paper. Yet words eluded her like a fleeting dream. How could she articulate the turmoil within? The conflict brewed not only in her heart, but also in her mind. A tempest of desires clashing against the unyielding cliffs of familial loyalty. "Lillian," her mother called from the kitchen, the sound pulling her from her reverie. "Dinner is ready." "Coming," she replied, forcing a smile that masked the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. As she descended the stairs, she felt the weight of her secret clinging to her like a shroud, each step echoing the unspoken truths that lingered in the air. At the dinner table, the atmosphere was tinged with a palpable tension, the clinking of cutlery a stark reminder of the unvoiced concerns that hovered between them. Margaret, her mother, busied herself with serving the food, an edge of nervous energy apparent in her movements. Lillian stole glances at her, longing to bridge the chasm that had formed since their last confrontation. "Have you spoken with Ethan lately?" Margaret inquired, her voice casual but her eyes searching. Lillian's heart raced at the mention of Ethan's name. Yes, we talked yesterday. He's good." Margaret's brow furrowed slightly. "That's nice to hear." She paused, her gaze drifting to the window as if seeking answers in the fading light. "I just hope you're being careful. Relationships can be so complicated, especially when they involve family." Lillian's chest tightened at the implication. How could she explain the depth of her feelings for Ethan without unveiling the truth that bound them? "I know, Mother. I'm trying to be cautious." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, the weather, the upcoming family gathering. But Lillian's mind remained preoccupied. Each laugh, each shared story felt like a reminder of the divide that had grown between them. The secret she carried was not just her own. It was a thread woven into the fabric of their lives, and she felt its tug with every breath. After dinner, Lillian retreated to her room, seeking solace in the quiet. She sank into her chair, the journal beckoning once more. With a deep breath, she began to write, her pen gliding over the paper as she poured out her heart. What does it mean to love someone who is both my brother and my heart's desire? How can I reconcile these two truths when the world demands I choose only one? As she wrote, memories of her and Ethan's moments together flooded her mind, their shared laughter beneath the stars, the warmth of his hand in hers, the way his eyes sparkled with mischief and tenderness. Each recollection reignited the fire within, reminding her of the love she dared not speak aloud. Yet each memory was also a reminder of the precariousness of their situation, the fragility of their bond under the looming specter of her mother's fears. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of her secret bore down with increasing intensity. Lillian felt herself becoming a vessel of unspoken truths, a keeper of secrets that threatened to consume her. The more she confided in her journal, the more isolated she felt from her mother and Ethan. Each entry was a catharsis, yet it also deepened her solitude, reinforcing the walls she had built around her heart. One afternoon, as the golden rays of the sun filtered through her window, Lillian made a decision. She could no longer be a silent keeper of secrets. The truth, although terrifying, was a necessary step toward authenticity, both for herself and for the relationships she cherished. She yearned for the freedom that came from honesty, to break the chains that bound her to secrecy. With newfound determination, she sought out her mother. "Mother, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering anxiety in her chest. Margaret looked up from her book, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" Lillian led her mother to the garden, where the vibrant blooms danced in the gentle breeze, as if nature itself conspired to ease the tension between them. They settled on a bench beneath the sprawling branches of a cherry blossom tree, the petals drifting down like soft whispers. "Mother," Lillian began, her heart pounding, "I need to be honest with you about Ethan. I love him, and it's more than just a fleeting feeling. It's real, and it's deep." Margaret's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and apprehension flashing across her face. "Lillian, Please," Lillian interrupted, her voice rising with urgency. "Before you say anything, I want you to understand that this is not just some infatuation. Ethan means the world to me, and I can't keep this from you any longer." "But Lillian, do you not see the complications this presents? He is your stepbrother. There are boundaries that should not be crossed." Margaret's voice trembled, a reflection of the turmoil within her. "I know," Lillian replied, her own voice steadier now, "but love does not always follow the rules we set for it. I've tried so hard to suppress my feelings, to follow the path you laid before me, but it feels like I'm suffocating under the weight of this secret." Margaret's gaze softened, the fierce protector within her wavering. "I only want what's best for you, Lillian. I fear that this path may lead to heartbreak." "I understand your fears, and I respect them," Lillian said, her heart aching for her mother's concern. "But I must choose my own path, even if it is fraught with risk. I cannot live in a world where I deny my heart." Silence enveloped them, the air thick with unspoken words. Lillian could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the tension easing as the truth settled between them. "What if I told you," Margaret began slowly, "that I had my own reasons for wanting to protect you from this?" Lillian's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "There are things from my past that I've kept hidden, things that make this situation more complicated than you know," Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was shielding you from pain, but perhaps I've only added to it." Lillian leaned closer, curiosity and concern mingling within her. "Mother, what do you mean? You can tell me." Margaret hesitated, her eyes clouded with memories long buried. "When I was your age, I fell in love with someone who was deemed unsuitable by my family. It was a love that brought joy, but also great heartache. I lost everything when I chose to follow my heart. I don't want that for you, Lillian. I'm scared of losing you too." The revelation struck Lillian like a thunderbolt, illuminating the shadows that had lingered between them. Suddenly, the weight of her mother's fears became clearer. "You were protecting me from your own pain," she said softly. "Yes," Margaret admitted, the vulnerability in her eyes palpable. "I didn't want you to suffer as I did, but perhaps I misjudged the strength of your heart." Lillian felt a rush of empathy for her mother, understanding the depths of her love and the roots of her fears. "I can't promise that my love for Ethan will be easy or without challenges," she said gently, "but I want to face those challenges with you, not in secret." Margaret's shoulders relaxed, the tension in her form dissipating as she absorbed Lillian's words. "I see that now," she replied, her voice quivering with emotion. "You are your own person, and I must learn to trust your choices, even when they frighten me." They sat together, the blossoms above them swaying gently in the breeze, a symbol of renewal and hope. Lillian felt the heavy weight of her secret begin to lift, replaced by a burgeoning connection with her mother that had once been strained. The truths they had shared wove a new fabric of understanding between them, a shared journey toward acceptance. "Let us navigate this together," Lillian said, her voice filled with conviction. "I want to keep you in my life, Mother. I'll need your guidance, but I also need your trust. Love is beautiful, but it can also be complicated, and I want to explore it without fear." Margaret nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I promise to try, Lillian. I will work to understand your love for Ethan, even if it takes time for me to fully accept it." As they embraced beneath the cherry blossom tree, Lillian felt a sense of liberation washing over her. The burdens of secrecy began to dissolve, replaced by a renewed bond of trust and understanding. In that moment, she understood that being a keeper of secrets no longer defined her. Instead, she was an architect of her own destiny, ready to embrace the complexities of love and family. But even as hope blossomed between them, Lillian knew that the journey ahead would not be without its trials. The path to acceptance would require patience, and she could not shield herself from the inevitable challenges that lay in wait. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of optimism ignite within her, a belief that love, when nurtured by honesty, could indeed weather any storm. As she returned to the house, Lillian's heart swelled with determination. She was ready to face the world, to embrace the truth of her feelings for Ethan without fear. The weight of her secret had transformed into a beacon of hope, guiding her toward a future where love could flourish, unencumbered by the shadows of the past. Chapter 19. The air hung thick with the weight of unspoken words, as Lillian stood upon the threshold of her future, a tempest of emotions swirling within her. The soft glow of twilight bathed her surroundings in a golden hue, yet this beauty felt distant, overshadowed by the turmoil that lay in wait. It was a moment steeped in the promise of change, a juncture where the delicate threads of her life could weave a new tapestry, or unravel entirely. The day had begun with a sense of normalcy, yet the fear of potential consequences loomed large. The weight of her secret, while momentarily alleviated, still lingered like a ghost, whispering doubts in her ear. But the fear of potential consequences loomed large. The weight of her secret, while momentarily alleviated, still lingered like a ghost, whispering doubts in her ear. Still whimpering desires in her ear. As she prepared for the family gathering that evening, Lillian felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The event promised to be a celebration, yet for her it felt more like a stage where the rawness of her emotions would be on display. She dressed carefully, selecting a deep blue dress that complemented her eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow in equal measure. She stared into the mirror, seeking strength in her reflection, but found only uncertainty staring back. "Lillian, are you ready?" her mother called from downstairs, the sound breaking her reverie. "I'll be down in a moment," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. With one last glance at herself, she descended the stairs, each step echoing the gravity of the decision she had made. The house was alive with laughter and chatter as guests began to arrive, the vibrant energy enveloping her like a warm embrace. Yet it felt foreign to Lillian, as if she were an observer in a play, where the lines were all too familiar, but the emotions were hers alone. She scanned the room, searching for Ethan amidst the crowd, her heart quickening at the thought of seeing him. When their eyes met across the room, a spark ignited, a silent understanding that transcended the chaos surrounding them. Ethan approached, his presence a balm to her frayed nerves. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low and sincere, sending a shiver of warmth through her. "Thank you," she replied, her cheeks flushing under his gaze. But as they stood together, the weight of their unspoken feelings hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that neither dared to address in the presence of their family. The evening unfolded with the usual fanfare. Conversations flowed like wine, laughter filled the air, and the warmth of family enveloped them. Yet, beneath the surface, Lillian felt the stirrings of anxiety. Each time she caught Ethan's eye, her heart raced, urging her to break the silence. The moment felt ripe for revelation, yet she hesitated, fearing the consequences of her truth. As the night wore on, Lillian found herself retreating to the garden, seeking solace in the cool night air. The stars twinkled above, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the insignificance of her worries in the grand scheme of things. She leaned against a tree, allowing herself a moment to breathe, to think. What was she truly afraid of? The answer came swiftly, a fear of losing not just Ethan, but the fragile balance of her family. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, a cautionary tale of love complicated by ties of blood. Yet, was it fair to deny her own happiness for the sake of maintaining a precarious peace? "Lillian!" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him stepping into the moonlight, his expression earnest and concerned. "You disappeared. I was worried." "I needed a moment," she admitted, her heart pounding as he stepped closer. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." The sincerity in his gaze urged her onward, and she took a deep breath, summoning the courage that had eluded her for so long. "Ethan, I can't keep pretending anymore. What we have, it's more than just friendship to me. I love you." The words hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, beautiful yet precarious. For a moment, the world around them faded, leaving only the two of them beneath the canopy of stars. His eyes widened in surprise, and for a heartbeat, Lillian feared she had miscalculated. But then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming his expression from shock to something deeper, something more profound. "You love me," he repeated softly, as if tasting the words for the first time. "Yes," she affirmed, her voice trembling with the weight of her admission. "I've tried to deny it, to push it aside, but it's true. I love you, Ethan. I always have." The air between them crackled with energy, a tension that had been building for weeks, suddenly cascading into a moment of clarity. Ethan stepped closer, his hand reaching out to brush against hers, a gesture both tentative and bold. "I love you too, Lillian. I felt this connection between us, but I didn't know how to approach it. I was afraid of what it might mean for both of us." Relief washed over her, a tide that pulled away the fears and uncertainties that had clung to her like a second skin. But as the joy of their shared confession began to settle, reality intruded with its unwelcome presence. "But what about my mother?" Lillian asked, her voice tinged with concern. "She won't understand. She's been so protective, and I fear this will only deepen the divide between us." Ethan's expression shifted, the warmth of their shared moment now tinged with the seriousness of their situation. "We can't allow fear to dictate our choices. Love is too precious to be stifled by secrets. We owe it to ourselves to be honest, even if it's difficult." Lillian nodded, understanding the truth of his words. They stood together in the garden, the cool breeze swirling around them, and for the first time, she felt a sense of clarity. Their love was a force that could not be contained, and if they were to navigate the complexities ahead, they would need to face them together. As they returned to the gathering, hand in hand, Lillian felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would confront her mother, open the lines of communication, and invite understanding into their relationship. It was a daunting prospect, but she would no longer shy away from her truth. The laughter and chatter of the family enveloped them once more, but Lillian's heart was no longer heavy with secrets. With Ethan by her side, she felt emboldened, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the evening progressed, Lillian took a moment to observe her family, the warmth and joy of the gathering contrasting starkly with her internal struggles. She caught sight of her mother laughing with relatives, the light in her eyes a reminder of the bond they shared, one that she longed to protect even as she stepped into the unknown. With Ethan beside her, she approached Margaret, her heart pounding. "Mother, can we talk?" Lillian's voice was steady, though her insides quaked with apprehension. Margaret turned, surprise flickering across her features. "Of course, dear. What is it?" There was warmth in her tone, yet Lillian sensed the underlying tension that had lingered. "Can we step outside?" Lillian gestured toward the garden, where the night air felt charged with possibility. Once outside, the cool air enveloped them, a stark contrast to the warmth of the gathering within. Lillian took a deep breath, searching for the right words as she felt Ethan's supportive presence beside her. "Mother, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice firm despite the tremor of uncertainty. "Ethan and we love each other. I know this may be difficult to hear, but I can't keep it from you any longer." Margaret's face paled, shock coursing through her features. "Lillian, you cannot be serious. He is your stepbrother. This is not something you can just overlook." "I know how it sounds," Lillian replied, her heart racing, "but love doesn't follow the rules we lay out for it. It's real, and I can't deny it any longer. Do you not see the complications this will bring? The scandal, the whispers. I have tried to protect you." Margaret's voice trembled with emotion, her maternal instinct flaring. "I appreciate your concern, Mother, but I need you to trust me," Lillian implored, stepping closer. "I want to be honest with you, to include you in my life, but I cannot do that if you are unwilling to accept my feelings." For a moment, silence reigned, the weight of Lillian's words hanging heavy in the air. Margaret's expression shifted, a battle of emotions playing across her face. Fear, concern, love. "Lillian, this is not just about you. It affects all of us." "I understand," Lillian said softly. "But I also understand that love is a choice, and I choose Ethan. I want you to be a part of this, but I cannot hide who I am for fear of what others might think." Margaret's gaze softened, the fierce protector within her faltering as she took in her daughter's sincerity. "I only want what's best for you, Lillian. I fear that this path may lead to heartbreak." "I am willing to face whatever comes," Lillian replied, her voice steady. "But I need you by my side." The truth hung between them like a fragile thread, one that could either bind them together or tear them apart. In that moment, Lillian felt the gravity of her choice, the turning point in her life that would define her future. Margaret's features softened further, and she sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Oh, I wish I could protect you from everything, but I know I cannot. If this is your choice, then I will try to understand. But it will take time." Lillian's heart swelled with hope. "Thank you, Mother. I promise to be patient. I want us to navigate this together, to find a way forward." As they stood together beneath the stars, Lillian felt a sense of peace settle over her. The turning point had arrived, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She had chosen love, chosen honesty, and chosen to embrace the complexities of her relationships. With Ethan by her side, Lillian felt empowered to face the challenges that lay ahead. Together, they would navigate the labyrinth of emotions, secrets, and fears, forging a path that was uniquely their own. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Lillian felt ready to embrace it, one courageous step at a time. Chapter 20. The dawn broke gently over the horizon, casting a tender light that filtered through the curtains of Lillian's room. She lay in bed, the remnants of her confession to Ethan swirling in her mind like leaves caught in a restless breeze. The warmth of his gaze, the sincerity of his words, lingered in the air around her, but alongside that warmth came the chill of uncertainty. Had she truly embraced her heart's desire, or had she merely invited chaos into the carefully constructed world she inhabited? Lillian rose, the soft morning light illuminating her features, and gazed into the mirror. She studied her reflection, searching for signs of the girl who had kept secrets, who had wrestled with the confines of loyalty and love. In that moment, she saw the flicker of resolve in her eyes, a determination to reclaim her narrative, to step boldly into the life she yearned for. Yet, the echoes of her mother's warnings reverberated in her thoughts. Love does not follow the rules we lay out for it. Ethan's words resonated deeply, but the specter of familial loyalty loomed large. Could she truly reconcile her feelings for Ethan with the bonds that tied her to her mother? As she dressed for the day, Lillian found herself navigating an internal landscape fraught with contradictions. She adored Ethan, loved him in a way that transcended the mere familial ties that bound them, yet the fear of rejection gnawed at her heart. Would her mother ever accept this love? Would Ethan's feelings remain steadfast in the face of society judgment? With a heavy heart, she made her way downstairs, the familiar sounds of breakfast wafting through the air. Margaret was already at the table, her demeanor a blend of warmth and tension. Lillian hesitated at the threshold, acutely aware of the unspoken words hanging in the air between them. "Good morning, Lillian," her mother greeted, her voice light yet tinged with an undertone of concern. "How did you sleep?" "Not well," Lillian admitted, taking her seat. "There's been a lot on my mind." Margaret regarded her with a mix of sympathy and apprehension. "I understand. It's a challenging time for us all." The words were vague, but the meaning was clear. She knew that Lillian's heart was in turmoil. "Mother, about last night," Lillian began, her voice faltering as she sought the courage to continue. "I want to talk about Ethan." Margaret's expression shifted, her brows knitting together. "Lillian, I think we need to tread carefully here. Your feelings are complicated, and I fear for what this could mean for you." "I know," Lillian replied, her voice steadying with determination. "But I cannot deny what I feel for him. I love him, Mother. I want you to understand that." A heavy silence enveloped them, the air thick with unspoken fears. Margaret's gaze fell to her hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. "You must realize the implications, Lillian. This is not a mere infatuation. This is a relationship that defies the very fabric of our family. And yet, it is a relationship I cannot ignore, Lillian countered, her heart racing. I am ready to embrace my truth, but I need you to support me. Margaret looked up, her eyes searching Lillian's for signs of naivety. What if this leads to heartbreak? What if the world does not accept you both? Then I will face that heartbreak, Lillian declared, her resolve hardening. But I cannot live a life dictated by fear of others' opinions. I want to carve my own path, even if it is fraught with danger. Margaret's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her features. You are brave, my dear, but bravery does not always shield us from pain. I only wish to protect you. Lillian reached across the table, taking her mother's hand in hers. I appreciate your concern, but I am not a child anymore. I must make my own choices, and I hope you can trust me to navigate this. Margaret's sigh was deep, a sound that seemed to echo through the very foundations of their relationship. Perhaps I must learn to let go, to allow you the freedom to choose your own course. But know this, Lillian. My heart will always be caught between wanting to protect you and wanting you to be happy. As the conversation lingered in the air, Lillian felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this moment of honesty could mend the rifts that had formed between them. The love she felt for Ethan was not a mere rebellion against familial bonds. It was a testament to the strength of her spirit, a spirit that longed for acceptance and understanding. After breakfast, Lillian stepped outside, the fresh air invigorating her senses. The garden was alive with colors, a vivid tapestry of flowers swaying gently in the breeze. She walked among them, her mind racing with thoughts of Ethan. Would he still feel the same after their bold declaration? The idea of facing him filled her with a mixture of joy and anxiety. As if summoned by her thoughts, Ethan appeared at the entrance to the garden, a figure framed by the morning light. He wore a soft smile that lit up his face, yet Lillian could detect a hint of nervousness in his posture. I was hoping to find you, he said, his voice warm yet cautious. Here I am, Lillian replied, her heart quickening at the sight of him. I needed to talk to you about us. Ethan stepped closer, his expression earnest. I've been thinking about everything you said last night, about how we feel. It's all so new, so exhilarating, but also terrifying. Lillian nodded, her heart racing. I understand. I feel the same way, but I believe in what we have, Ethan. I want to explore it despite the risks. He took a step forward, his eyes searching hers for confirmation. I want that too, Lillian, but we need to be prepared for what lies ahead. Your mother, she may not be as accepting as we hope. She is trying, Lillian replied, recalling their conversation. I think she is beginning to understand that I need to make my own choices, but it will take time. Ethan's gaze softened, and he reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I will support you, no matter what. I want you to be happy, and if that means facing your mother's fears head-on, then so be it. The intimacy of the gestures sent shivers down her spine, a potent reminder of their connection that transcended the chaos surrounding them. Thank you, Lillian whispered, her heart swelling with affection. But I also want you to know that this is not just about me. It's about us, and the journey we are embarking on together. With a shared sense of purpose, they strolled through the garden, discussing their hopes and dreams for the future. Each word exchanged felt like a promise, a vow to navigate the complexities ahead with honesty and courage. As the sun arched higher in the sky, they found a secluded bench beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree. Sitting side by side, their fingers intertwined, Lillian felt a sense of peace wash over her. Here, in this moment, the world outside faded away. It was just the two of them, bound by a love that defied societal norms and family expectations. "Do you think we can really make this work?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "Together, I believe we can transform this house into a beautiful home for all to enjoy. I'm glad you like it. We're done with upsets and troubles." Ethan nodded, his expression earnest. "I'll speak to her, if you think it will help. I want her to see how much you mean to me, how genuine this is." Lillian squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I appreciate that, but I want to be the one to approach her. It's important she hears it from me first." "Then we'll do it together," Ethan said, determination shining in his eyes. "We will face this as a united front." The resolve shared between them was a powerful force, a promise that they would challenge the world together. Lillian felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a girl caught in the web of family secrets. She was a woman ready to embrace her heart's desire, ready to fight for a love that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As they sat beneath the ancient oak, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above, a soft whisper of encouragement. Lillian closed her eyes, savoring the moment, the intimacy, the certainty that love, when nurtured with honesty, could weather any storm. Yet, as she opened her eyes, the reality of their situation washed over her like a cold wave. The world outside the sanctuary of the garden was still fraught with challenges. They would have to confront her mother, navigate societal expectations, and face the potential fallout of their relationship. The journey ahead would not be easy. But Lillian felt emboldened, ready to face whatever came next. With a newfound determination, she turned to Ethan, her voice steady. "Let's talk to my mother tonight. Together." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with pride and affection. "I'm with you, Lillian, always." As they rose from the bench, hand in hand, Lillian felt a surge of hope. Together, they would step into the unknown, ready to confront the complexities of love and family. The heart's desire would not be stifled. It would flourish, nurtured by the very honesty that had brought them to this pivotal moment. With each step they took toward the house, Lillian felt lighter, as if the burdens of secrecy were beginning to lift. She was no longer just a keeper of secrets. She was a seeker of truth, and she was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. Chapter 21. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the cobblestone path leading to the old willow tree by the riverbank. It was here, in the sanctuary of nature, that Lillian had agreed to meet Ethan, a clandestine rendezvous steeped in both anticipation and trepidation. The world around her buzzed with the sounds of life, yet all she could hear was the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. As she approached the tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, Lillian felt a flutter of uncertainty. The weight of her emotions pressed down upon her, and the very air seemed charged with the electricity of secrets. She had spent the night contemplating her feelings, the truth of her love for Ethan, now a vibrant flame that refused to be extinguished. Yet that flame was also a beacon, drawing in the shadows of potential repercussions. Ethan was already there, leaning against the gnarled trunk of the willow, his expression a mixture of eagerness and concern. When his eyes met hers, a smile broke across his face, illuminating the worry that had been etched there. "Oh, you came," he said, his voice a gentle melody that soothed her frayed nerves. "I wouldn't miss it," Lillian replied, her heart swelling at the sight of him. "I needed to see you." As they settled beneath the sheltering branches, Lillian's mind raced with thoughts of the conversation ahead. "Have you thought more about what we discussed?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the gesture revealing the turmoil beneath his calm facade. "Every moment, it's all I can think about." He paused, gathering his thoughts as if they were fragile shards of glass. "I want to be with you, Lillian, but I know the challenges we are facing." Lillian nodded, her heart aching with the weight of their shared secret. "I've spoken to my mother. She is trying to understand, but I fear she does not fully grasp the depth of what we share." "What if she never does?" Ethan's voice was laced with concern, a thread of doubt weaving through his words. "What if this love puts you at odds with your family forever?" "Then we will navigate that path together," Lillian declared, her resolve hardening. "I refuse to let fear dictate my happiness." Ethan's gaze softened, and he reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both tender and defiant. "I admire your courage, Lillian, but we must tread carefully. The world outside our little haven may not be so forgiving." The willow's branches swayed above them, as if echoing their sentiments. Lillian felt the warmth of Ethan's hand in hers, a grounding force amidst the uncertainty swirling around them. "I believe in us, Ethan. We can create a new narrative, one that embraces our truth without shame." As they sat together, the river beside them flowed steadily, a symbol of continuity and change. Lillian recalled the moments they had shared, the laughter and the quiet understanding that had blossomed into something deeper. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of their connection, a tapestry now woven with both hope and fear. "Let's make a plan," Ethan suggested, his brow furrowing in concentration. "We need to approach your mother again, together. She deserves to hear it from both of us, to understand the sincerity of our feelings." Lillian felt a rush of gratitude for Ethan's steadfastness. "Yes, but we must be prepared for her reaction. I cannot bear to see her hurt." "Nor can I," he agreed, his gaze unwavering. "But we owe it to ourselves to be honest. No more hiding." The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and pink, a breathtaking backdrop to their clandestine meeting. Lillian took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their impending confrontation settle in her chest. "We will speak to her tonight," she affirmed, determination lacing her tone. "Tonight?" Ethan echoed, his grip on her hand tightening. "Together." As the evening unfolded, the golden light of dusk gave way to twilight, wrapping the world in a soft embrace. Lillian's mind whirled with thoughts of the conversation to come, yet amidst the chaos, a sense of calm washed over her. She had Ethan by her side, a partner in this delicate dance of truth and love. When they arrived home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Margaret was in the sitting room, her silhouette framed by the flickering light of the fireplace. Lillian's heart raced as she exchanged a glance with Ethan, both of them silently acknowledging the enormity of the moment. "Mother, may we talk?" Lillian's voice rang out, steady despite the storm brewing within her. Margaret looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" "It's about Ethan," Lillian began, her pulse quickening as she took a step closer to her mother. "We need to discuss our relationship." Margaret's expression shifted, a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Your relationship?" She glanced at Ethan, who stood beside Lillian, his presence solid and reassuring. "Yes," Lillian continued, gathering her courage, "Ethan and I love each other. This is not merely a fleeting infatuation. It is profound and real. We want to be together, and I need you to understand that." Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Margaret's eyes widened, stricken by the weight of Lillian's words. "Lillian, you cannot be serious. This is not what I envisioned for you." "I know it's difficult to understand," Lillian pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. "But love does not conform to our expectations. It simply is." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady yet gentle. "Margaret, I care deeply for Lillian. I would never wish to hurt her or your family, but we cannot hide our feelings any longer." Margaret's gaze shifted between them, the conflict within her evident. "You must realize the consequences of this union. It could tear our family apart." "Or it could bring us closer together," Lillian countered, her voice imbued with conviction. "I want to build a life rooted in honesty, not secrets. I need your support, Mother." The tension in the room crackled like static electricity, each word holding the weight of 1,000 unsaid thoughts. Margaret's expression softened, a flicker of understanding breaking through her apprehension. "But what will the world say? What will our friends think?" "The world will have its opinions," Ethan replied, his tone unwavering. "But our happiness cannot be contingent upon external validation. We must forge our own path." Lillian felt a swell of hope at Ethan's words, but Margaret's gaze remained troubled. "Love is a beautiful thing, but it is also fraught with challenges. I fear for your future, Lillian." "I appreciate your concern," Lillian said, her voice steady. "But I must choose my own future. I cannot live in the shadow of fear." Margaret's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of the world rested upon them. "You are so determined, my dear. But I worry you are not fully aware of the implications of your choices." "Perhaps not," Lillian admitted, her heart racing. "But I'm willing to embrace whatever comes. I love Ethan, and I want to build a future with him." In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Margaret's expression softened, and her gaze flickered with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You are my daughter, and I love you. I will always want what is best for you. But I also need time to process this." "Take all the time you need," Lillian replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But please know that my love for Ethan is unwavering." As the conversation drew to a close, Lillian felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had taken the first step into the light, confronting the shadows that had loomed over them for so long. It would not be easy, but they had begun to carve a path forward, one rooted in truth and love. Stepping outside into the cool night air, Lillian turned to Ethan, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me." "I'll always be here," he promised, wrapping his arms around her in a gentle embrace. "Together we can face anything." As they stood under the stars, Lillian felt a sense of clarity settle over her. The world was vast and full of possibilities, and she was no longer bound by the chains of secrecy. With Ethan by her side, she was ready to embrace the future, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Together, they would navigate the complexities of love and family, forging a new narrative that honored their truth. And in that moment of quiet reflection, as the universe spun around them, Lillian knew that their journey had only just begun. The path would be fraught with trials, but it was also illuminated by the promise of love, an unwavering force that would guide them through the storm. Chapter 22. In the quiet hours of the late afternoon, when the sun hung low and cast a golden hue across the landscape, Lillian sat in the small garden behind her mother's house. It was a sanctuary of sorts, a refuge where she often retreated to escape the weight of her thoughts. The sweet scent of blooming jasmine mingled with the earthy aroma of fresh soil, creating a serene atmosphere that belied the turmoil brewing within her heart. Yet today, the tranquility was punctured by an unsettling sense of foreboding. She had just spent a tender afternoon with Ethan, their secret meeting still fresh in her mind, the warmth of his hand in hers lingering like a phantom touch. They had exchanged dreams and fears, each word a thread weaving them closer together. But now, as the shadows lengthened, a chill crept into her thoughts. An undeniable feeling that their moment of bliss would soon be threatened. Not long after Ethan had left, a figure appeared at the entrance to the garden, silhouetted against the fading light. It was Clara, a close friend from school, her demeanor a mix of excitement and anxiety. Lillian's heart leapt at the sight of her, but the look on Clara's face gave her pause. "Lillian, I've been looking for you everywhere," Clara exclaimed, her voice breathless as she rushed toward her. "You won't believe what I just heard." "What is it?" Lillian asked, her heart pounding. The last thing she needed was more turmoil added to her already complicated life. "Your mother is having tea with Mrs. Grayson," Clara said, lowering her voice as if the very mention of the name could invoke unwanted attention. "And you know how Mrs. Grayson loves to gossip. She's been asking questions about you and Ethan." The implications of Clara's words sank in like a stone. Lillian's stomach twisted into knots. Rumors had a way of spreading like wildfire in their small community, and Mrs. Grayson was nothing if not a diligent distributor of juicy tidbits. What did she say? Lillian's voice trembled, betraying her anxiety. "Just that she's seen you two together more often lately. She mentioned something about how close you've become, and you know how the townsfolk love to speculate," Clara replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "I thought you should know I'm worried that if your mother catches wind of it, she'll get the wrong idea." Lillian's mind raced. What if she does? What if she confronts me? The prospect of her mother discovering the depth of her feelings for Ethan filled her with dread. I can't let that happen. "Maybe we can talk to her?" Clara suggested, her voice gentle but firm. "Help her understand that it's not what she thinks?" Lillian shook her head fervently. "No, it's not that simple. My mother is already on edge about Ethan and me. If she hears any rumors from Mrs. Grayson, she'll only become more protective and suspicious." Clara stepped closer, her eyes searching Lillian's. "Then we need to act quickly. You have to confront this before it spirals out of control. Perhaps we can find a way to reassure her, to show her that your feelings for Ethan are genuine." Lillian sighed, her heart heavy with the burden of secrecy. "I don't know if she'll ever understand." The weight of her mother's expectations pressed down upon her, suffocating her spirit. "Listen, Lillian," Clara said, her tone shifting to one of encouragement. "You deserve to be happy. If Ethan makes you happy, then you have to fight for that happiness. You can't let anyone, not even your mother, dictate who you love." Lillian's resolve began to strengthen, even as fear threatened to take hold. "You're right. I can't let fear dictate my choices any longer, but I need to be smart about this." Clara nodded, her expression serious. "Let's make a plan. We can talk to your mother together, but first, we have to find a way to stop Mrs. Grayson from making a spectacle of it." As they strategized, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden into twilight. Lillian's thoughts swirled with possibilities, each scenario a tangled web of fear and hope. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing became clear. She could no longer remain passive. The time for action was now. As the days passed, Lillian and Clara put their plan into motion. They decided to confront Mrs. Grayson directly, hoping to quash any rumors before they ballooned into something more damaging. Clara's spirited nature gave Lillian courage, and the idea of standing up for her feelings ignited a fire within her. The following afternoon, they approached Mrs. Grayson's home, a quaint cottage adorned with vibrant flowers and an air of genteel propriety. Lillian's heart raced as they knocked on the door. The sound echoed in her mind, a herald of potential confrontation. Mrs. Grayson answered, her expression one of mild surprise. "Lillian! Clara! How lovely to see you!" Her voice was as sweet as honey, yet Lillian could detect the underlying curiosity that colored her tone. "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson," Lillian replied, forcing a smile. "We were hoping to speak with you for a moment." "Of course, come in." Mrs. Grayson stepped aside, ushering them into her cozy parlor filled with the scent of freshly brewed tea. Lillian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down upon her, her palms sweaty with anticipation. Once seated, Clara took the lead. "Mrs. Grayson, we wanted to discuss something important. We've heard rumors about Lillian and Ethan that we believe need clarifying." Mrs. Grayson's interest peaked, her eyes glimmering with intrigue. "Oh, do tell. I do love a good story." Lillian exchanged a furtive glance with Clara, her heart pounding. "It's not a story, Mrs. Grayson. It's the truth. Ethan and I care for each other deeply, and we wish for you to understand that our relationship is genuine and meaningful." A flicker of surprise crossed Mrs. Grayson's face, quickly replaced by a calculating smile. "My dear, love is a beautiful thing indeed, but you must understand, the world can be quite judgmental. People talk, and I would hate for you to be the subject of their gossip." "Exactly," Clara interjected, her tone earnest. "That's why we're here. We want to make sure that whatever you hear is the truth, not speculation." Mrs. Grayson leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. "I appreciate your candor, but you must know that I have a duty to my friends and neighbors. They rely on me for information, and I wouldn't want to mislead them." Lillian felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "We're not asking you to mislead anyone. We're simply asking for your discretion. If you hear any gossip about us, we hope you will set the record straight." Mrs. Grayson's smile widened, but there was an edge to it. "Ah, but dear Lillian, you must understand that the truth is often subjective. What you see as love, others may see as folly." Clara leaned in, her voice low but passionate. "But isn't it our right to love who we wish? Lillian and Ethan are not doing anything wrong. They deserve to be happy without fear of judgment." William felt a swell of gratitude for Clara's fierce spirit, but Mrs. Grayson's expression remained inscrutable. "Love is indeed a complex tapestry, my dear. But remember, the threads of society are tightly woven. One wrong pull and the whole thing could unravel." The conversation hung heavily in the air, Lillian's heart racing with the weight of Mrs. Grayson's words. "We just want to live our truth," Lillian said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "Please, help us preserve that." Mrs. Grayson regarded Lillian for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Very well, I shall consider your request, but remember, the world is not as forgiving as you may hope. I can only do so much." With that, the conversation shifted, and as they departed, Lillian felt a mix of relief and apprehension. They had spoken their truth, but the specter of Mrs. Grayson's influence still loomed large. Would she keep her promise? Would the whispers in the town grow louder, fueled by curiosity and judgment? That evening, as Lillian sat in her room, the weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. She gazed out the window, the stars twinkling like distant promises in the vastness of the night sky. Yet even the beauty of the cosmos could not assuage the turmoil within her heart. Suddenly, a knock on her door broke the silence. It was her mother, Margaret, a look of concern etched across her features. "May I come in, Lillian?" "Of course, Mother," Lillian replied, her heart racing. She braced herself for another round of questioning, another layer of complexity added to their already strained relationship. Margaret entered, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on Lillian. "I wanted to check on you. I've been hearing things, and I'm worried." Lillian swallowed hard, the words threatening to catch in her throat. "What have you heard?" "Just whispers. Nothing concrete, but you know how people can be. I want you to be careful, Lillian. I don't want you to get hurt." "Mother, I can handle this. I'm not a child anymore," Lillian replied, her tone firm. "Ethan and I are being responsible. We care for each other." Margaret's features softened, but the concern remained. "I understand that, but I worry about the implications. What if this relationship brings you pain? What if it strains our family further?" Lillian felt a surge of frustration. "I can't live my life in fear of what might happen. I need to follow my heart." Margaret sighed, a sound heavy with unspoken fears. "I only want what's best for you, dear. I hope you understand that." "I do, Mother, but I also need you to trust me. I'm making my own choices now." Margaret nodded slowly, her expression a mixture of resignation and understanding. "I will try, Lillian, but please, promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Lillian said, though uncertainty gnawed at her insides. As her mother left the room, Lillian felt a flicker of hope mingled with fear. She was determined to embrace her love for Ethan, but the specter of gossip and judgment loomed large, threatening to unravel the delicate threads of their relationship. The next day, as Lillian ventured into town, the air was thick with whispers. Her heart sank as she caught snippets of conversations, the name Ethan flitting through the air like a ghost. The more she heard, the more she felt the weight of scrutiny press upon her shoulders. And then, as if summoned by her thoughts, she spotted Mrs. Grayson across the square, her posture regal and commanding, surrounded by a gaggle of women who hung on her every word. Lillian's stomach twisted at the sight. What stories had she woven? What truths had she distorted? "Lillian," Clara called out, rushing to her side. "Have you heard what Mrs. Grayson has been saying?" "No," Lillian replied, dread pooling in her chest. "She's been telling everyone that you and Ethan are more than just friends. It's becoming a scandal." Lillian felt her breath hitch in her throat. "This can't be happening." "We have to confront her again," Clara insisted, her eyes fierce with determination. "We can't let her ruin your happiness." "I don't know if it will help," Lillian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to try. We can't let her dictate our lives." With Clara's support, Lillian felt a flicker of resolve ignite within her. They would confront Mrs. Grayson once more, but this time they would do so not just for themselves, but for the love that had blossomed against all odds. As they arrived at Mrs. Grayson's home, Lillian's heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the path, mirroring the turmoil within her. They knocked on the door, and when Mrs. Grayson appeared, her expression was one of surprise, quickly masked by a veneer of politeness. "Lillian, Clara, what a pleasant surprise." "Mrs. Grayson, we need to talk," Lillian stated, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Of course. Come in," Mrs. Grayson replied, a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. Once seated, Lillian took a deep breath. "Mrs. Grayson, we heard you've been discussing my relationship with Ethan. We want to ask you to stop spreading rumors." Mrs. Grayson feigned innocence. "Rumors? My dear, I merely share what I hear. It's not my fault that people are interested in your affairs." Lillian felt her frustration boil over. "But what you're sharing is not the truth. It's damaging, and it could hurt both of us." "Love is a fragile thing, Lillian. People can be cruel," Mrs. Grayson replied, her tone almost condescending. Clara leaned forward, her voice firm. "But it's not your place to dictate how others perceive it. Lillian and Ethan deserve to love freely without your interference." Mrs. Grayson's expression shifted, a hint of annoyance crossing her features. "And yet the world is not as forgiving as you wish it to be. I'm merely offering caution." Lillian felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. Caution should not come at the expense of our happiness. We deserve to live our truth, free from judgment. With each word, Lillian felt the strength of her conviction growing. "We're not asking for your approval, Mrs. Grayson. We're asking for your respect." Mrs. Grayson regarded them for a long moment, her demeanor shifting subtly. "Very well. I shall consider your request, but remember, the truth is often colored by perception." As they left her home, Lillian felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. They had stood up for their love, but the battle was far from over. The town's whispers lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon, threatening to unleash chaos at any moment. That evening, as Lillian lay in bed, the shadows danced on the walls, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. She couldn't escape the feeling that the storm was only just beginning, that the outside threat of judgment and gossip would come to a head. But she also felt a flicker of hope. She had fought for her truth, and with Clara's support, she knew that she could face whatever lay ahead. Lillian closed her eyes, drawing strength from the love she shared with Ethan. Whatever challenges awaited them, she was ready to confront them head-on, to protect the beautiful bond they had forged. As she drifted into a restless sleep, a resolve settled over her. She would not let anyone, not even the whispers of the town, dictate her happiness. She would embrace her love for Ethan, come what may, and together they would weather the storm. Chapter 23. The air in the house was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable weight that pressed down upon Lillian's chest as she entered the dimly lit sitting room. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls, and the distant sound of rain tapping against the window seemed to echo the turmoil within her heart. It was here, in this intimate space, that her mother often found solace, and it was here that Lillian feared she would face the reckoning of her hidden love. Lillian had barely settled into a chair when Margaret emerged from the kitchen, her hands still damp from washing the teacups. The moment their eyes met, Lillian felt the air shift, thickening with the anticipation of confrontation. Margaret's expression was unreadable, but the tension in her posture betrayed a brewing storm. "Lillian," her mother began, her voice steady but tinged with an undercurrent of emotion, "I need to speak with you about something very important." "Is it about Ethan?" Lillian asked, her heart racing. She had anticipated this moment, yet the reality of it sent shivers down her spine. I thought we could talk later." "There is no later, my dear," Margaret replied, her tone firm. "I've heard some things that cannot be ignored." Lillian's breath caught in her throat. "What have you heard?" A flicker of hurt crossed Margaret's face, quickly masked by a steely resolve. "It seems the entire town is buzzing with whispers about you and Ethan. I cannot allow this to continue without addressing it." Lillian's mind raced. The very thought of her mother discovering the depth of her feelings for Ethan was unbearable. "Mother, please, it's not what you think. We have been careful." "Careful?" Margaret interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Is that what you call this? Your secretive meetings? Your late-night conversations? It is only a matter of time before someone reveals the truth to me, or worse, before you hurt each other." Lillian felt a surge of defiance. "You don't understand. Ethan is not just a brother," Margaret interjected, her expression a mixture of anger and deep concern. "That is precisely the point. He is your stepbrother, Lillian. This is not a path that leads to happiness." "What, can't you see that love is love?" Lillian's voice trembled, the passion of her words igniting a fire within her. "What we share is real, and I cannot simply cast it aside because of societal expectations." Margaret's face paled and her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sadness. "You are too young to understand the consequences of such a relationship. I have lived through the repercussions of love that defies boundaries. I cannot bear to see you suffer as I did." Lillian felt a pang of sympathy for her mother, yet it was overshadowed by her own anguish. "You cannot keep me from loving Ethan. I won't allow it." The room fell silent, the tension thickening until it felt suffocating. Margaret's gaze softened as she looked at her daughter, the weight of her own experiences looming large. "Lillian, please. I am only trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Lillian echoed, incredulous. "This is not protection. It is a prison. You want me to live a lie, to deny my heart?" Margaret stepped closer, desperation creeping into her voice. "I am begging you to reconsider. This is not just about you. It affects our entire family, our reputation. You must think of the consequences." "Consequences?" Lillian retorted, rising from her chair, her heart pounding. "What about my happiness, my life? You cannot dictate who I love based on your fears." "It is not just my fears, Lillian." Margaret's voice rose, breaking slightly. "It is the reality of the world we live in. You must be realistic about your choices." The storm outside intensified, the rain battering against the window as if mirroring the tempest within the room. Lillian felt her heart racing, a mixture of anger, fear, and heartbreak coursing through her veins. "You are asking me to choose between my love and my family. How can you expect me to do that?" Margaret's expression shifted, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never wanted this for you. I wanted you to have a life filled with joy, not one marred by scandal." In that moment, Lillian saw the depth of her mother's love, the fear that drove her to such lengths. But it was not enough to quell the fire within her. "Mother, I cannot live a life dictated by fear. If you cannot accept my love for Ethan, then I fear we are at an impasse." The silence that followed was heavy, a chasm opening between them that felt insurmountable. Margaret's shoulders slumped, the weight of their confrontation visibly exhausting her. "I cannot watch you make a mistake that could ruin your life," she whispered, her voice cracking. Lillian felt her heart shatter at her mother's words. "And I cannot live with the knowledge that I denied my own heart." As the rain continued to pour, Lillian turned away, her resolve hardening. This was a moment of reckoning, a breaking point that would define their relationship moving forward. She could feel the distance growing between them, a gulf that threatened to swallow them whole. "Lillian," Margaret said softly, reaching out as if to bridge the chasm. "Please, let us find a way to talk about this." But Lillian was already moving toward the door, her throat tight with unshed tears. "I need time," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I need to think." As she stepped outside, the rain fell in torrents, soaking her instantly. The cool droplets against her skin felt like a balm, washing away the heat of confrontation and the pain of her mother's words. She welcomed the storm, relishing the chaos that mirrored her inner turmoil. In the solitude of the rain, Lillian felt a rush of clarity. Her love for Ethan was not a mistake. It was a force that propelled her forward, a truth that demanded to be acknowledged. She could not allow her mother's fears to dictate her choices any longer. With every step she took, the weight of her decision settled upon her. She must confront this reality, not only for herself but for Ethan as well. The love they shared was precious, and it deserved a chance to flourish, free from the constraints of secrecy and shame. As she wandered through the garden, the rain mingling with her tears, Lillian resolved to speak with Ethan. They could face whatever challenges lay ahead together, for love, in its truest form, was worth fighting for. And though the road may be fraught with obstacles, she was ready to embrace the journey, wherever it might lead. Chapter 24. The rain had ceased its relentless assault, leaving behind a heavy stillness that blanketed the house. Lillian sat on the edge of her bed, her heart racing as the remnants of her confrontation with her mother echoed in her mind. The air felt charged with unspoken words, a storm of emotion swirling just beneath the surface. She could hear the faint creak of the floorboards as her mother moved about the house, her presence a constant reminder of the ultimatum that loomed over them like a dark cloud. Lillian's thoughts drifted to Ethan, his laughter, and the way his eyes sparkled with mischief. In her mind, she replayed the moments they had shared in secrecy, the stolen glances and whispered confessions of love that had flourished in the shadows. But now, with her mother's words hanging heavily in the air, she felt a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Margaret stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. "Lillian," she said, her voice steady but fraught with emotion. "We need to talk." "About what?" Lillian replied, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. She knew what was coming, but she dreaded the confrontation all the same. "About Ethan," Margaret stated, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I cannot remain silent any longer. You must end this involvement with him." Lillian's heart sank. "You cannot be serious, Mother. You cannot ask me to do that." "I am asking you to think of our family," Margaret insisted, her eyes fierce yet vulnerable. "You have to understand that this could destroy everything we've built. The gossip, the whispers, they will consume us." "Why can't you see that I love him?" Lillian retorted, rising to her feet, her anger igniting a fire within her. "This isn't just some childish infatuation. This is real, and it matters to me." Margaret's expression softened, her resolve wavering for a moment. "Lillian, love is not enough. Not in this situation. This love could lead to ruin. Ruin for you, for me, and for our family." Tears brimmed in Lillian's eyes as the weight of her mother's words bore down upon her. "You are asking me to choose between my happiness and your fear. How is that fair?" "Life isn't fair, dear," Margaret replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It is filled with choices that often pit our desires against our responsibilities. I am offering you a chance to protect yourself from heartache. Lillian shook her head, feeling the sting of betrayal. Protect myself? Or protect you? You are afraid of scandal, afraid of what others will say. But what about me? What about my heart? Margaret stepped closer, her arms outstretched as if to embrace Lillian, but Lillian recoiled, unable to bear the suffocating nature of her mother's love. I am not trying to hurt you. I am trying to save you from making a mistake that could haunt you for the rest of your life. What am I supposed to do? Lillian cried, her voice breaking. Just pretend that I don't feel this way? Just turn away from someone who makes me feel alive? What if I can't? Then you must make a choice, Margaret said, her voice firm again. You must choose between this relationship with Ethan and your future. I cannot support this union, and I will not allow you to pursue it without consequence. Lillian's heart raced as the weight of the ultimatum settled heavily upon her. What do you mean by consequence? Simply this. If you continue to see him, I will have no choice but to distance myself from you, Margaret said, her expression resolute. I will not live in a house where secrets and lies fester. I cannot bear it. The room fell silent, the gravity of her words hanging between them like a chasm that threatened to swallow them whole. Lillian felt her breath hitch in her throat as the reality of her mother's ultimatum sank in. You would actually do that? You would turn your back on me? I do this out of love, Lillian, Margaret replied, her voice softer now, but still unwavering. I am trying to help you see reason. This is not just about you. It is about what is best for our family. Lillian staggered back, her heart heavy with despair. She could feel the walls closing in, the very foundation of her world shaking beneath her feet. And what if I choose Ethan? She whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Then you must accept that you will be alone, Margaret said, her voice steady, though the hurt in her eyes betrayed her own anguish. I cannot support a decision that goes against everything I believe in. I will not watch you ruin your life. The finality of her mother's words struck Lillian like a blow. She felt the tears spill over as she turned away, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. How could she choose? How could she turn her back on one love in pursuit of another? Mother, please, Lillian pleaded, her voice raw. I need time to think. Time is something you do not have, Margaret replied, her own voice faltering. The longer you wait, the more the whispers grow. You must decide, and you must decide soon. With that, Margaret turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her with an ominous finality. Lillian sank onto her bed, the weight of the ultimatum pressing down on her like a heavy shroud. She felt utterly alone, torn between two worlds, one that promised safety and acceptance, and another that ignited her heart and soul in ways she had never imagined. As the silence of the room enveloped her, Lillian allowed herself to cry. She wept for the love she felt for Ethan, for the dreams they had shared in stolen moments, and for the relationship with her mother that now hung by a thread. The ultimatum loomed over her like a dark specter, threatening to consume everything she held dear. In the depths of her despair, she thought of Ethan's smile, the way his laughter danced in the air, and the warmth of his touch. He had become a part of her inextricably, and to sever that bond felt like tearing apart a piece of her very soul. Yet, the fear of losing her mother, of being cast out into a world of uncertainty, loomed large. Hours passed and the shadows deepened as night fell around her. Lillian sat in the stillness, her mind racing. She knew she had to make a choice, but the weight of that choice felt insurmountable. In the darkness, a flicker of resolve sparked within her. She could not allow fear to dictate her life any longer. She had to confront her mother, to seek understanding and perhaps even reconciliation. But more importantly, she needed to speak with Ethan, to share the enormity of her mother's ultimatum, and to gauge his feelings about their future. With newfound determination, Lillian rose from her bed and wiped her tears. She would not allow this ultimatum to shatter her dreams without a fight. She would stand for her love, for the truth that had blossomed between her and Ethan, even if it meant facing the consequences of that love head-on. As she moved toward the door, the weight of the decision still hung in the air, but Lillian felt a flicker of hope. She would not let fear rule her heart. Tomorrow she would speak to Ethan, and together they would navigate the tempest that lay ahead. Love, after all, was worth fighting for, and she was ready to embrace the battle with her whole heart. Chapter 25. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden hue over the garden, but Lillian felt none of its warmth. Instead, a chill ran through her as she recalled the ultimatum her mother had delivered the night before. She had spent the entire night wrestling with the implications of Margaret's words. The love she had for Ethan felt like a fragile thing, and now it seemed threatened by the very person who had once nurtured her heart. Determined to find solace, Lillian turned to her closest friend, Clara, whose unwavering support had always been a balm for her troubled spirit. They had shared countless secrets, but today, Lillian felt a weight heavier than any she had carried before. She needed to confide in Clara, to unburden herself of the turmoil that churned within. As she walked toward the cafe where they often met, her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and fear. What if Clara didn't understand? What if she judged her for her feelings for Ethan? Lillian shook her head, trying to dispel the thoughts. Clara was her confidant, her ally. Surely she would stand by her side. The cafe, a quaint little place adorned with flowering vines, was alive with chatter and laughter, a stark contrast to Lillian's internal storm. When she spotted Clara at their usual table, her heart lifted momentarily. Clara's bright smile was infectious, and Lillian hoped it would bring her the comfort she desperately needed. "Lillian!" Clara exclaimed, rising to envelop her in a warm embrace. "You look troubled. What's wrong?" Lillian took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Can we talk?" It's about Ethan." Clara's expression shifted to one of concern as they settled into their seats. "Of course. What's going on?" The words tumbled out in a rush, and Lillian recounted the events of the previous night, the confrontation with her mother, the ultimatum, and her fear of losing both her love for Ethan and her mother's approval. Clara listened intently, her brow furrowing as Lillian spoke. "Your mother can't dictate your happiness, Lillian," Clara said firmly once Lillian had finished. "You have to follow your heart." "But what if it means losing my mother?" Lillian whispered, her voice trembling. "What if I have to choose between them?" Clara reached across the table, squeezing Lillian's hand. "You shouldn't have to choose. Love is complicated, but you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be with Ethan, if that's what you want." Just then the door swung open, and a gust of wind swept through the cafe, causing Lillian to shiver. She turned to see a familiar figure enter, and her heart sank. It was Sarah, a mutual acquaintance whose sharp tongue and penchant for gossip were well known in their circle. Lillian's stomach twisted as she realized that Sarah was also acquainted with Ethan. "Lillian, Clara," Sarah called, her voice dripping with feigned cheerfulness as she approached their table. "Mind if I join you?" Lillian exchanged a quick glance with Clara, who nodded subtly, though Lillian sensed that this was not the kind of interruption they needed. "Sure, Sarah," Lillian replied, forcing a smile. As Sarah settled into the chair, Lillian's unease grew. She could feel Clara's tension beside her, the air thickening with unspoken words. "What a lovely day, isn't it?" Sarah continued, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around them. "I heard some interesting news this morning." "Oh?" Clara replied, her tone cautious. "Yes, I heard that Ethan has been spending quite a lot of time with a certain someone," Sarah said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "You wouldn't believe the rumors going around. Apparently, they're quite close." Lillian's heart raced. She could feel the color drain from her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Oh, you know how it is," Sarah said, leaning in conspiratorially. "People talk, and the whispers are growing. Some say he's found someone else entirely. Can you imagine?" Lillian's stomach churned. The implication was clear, and she felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her. "That's ridiculous," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm. "Ethan and I are—" "Are what?" Sarah interrupted, her smile widening. "Are still in the honeymoon phase of your little sibling rivalry? Because from where I stand, it doesn't look like that at all." Lillian felt a surge of anger. "We're not rivals, Sarah. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do, and if I know, then others will surely find out," Sarah replied, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "You might want to have a talk with Ethan, and unless, of course, you're not as close as you think." Lillian glanced at Clara, whose eyes were wide with concern. In that moment, a sickening realization washed over her. If Sarah knew, then it was only a matter of time before the entire town would. "Are you telling me this?" Lillian demanded, her voice low but fierce. "What do you gain from spreading rumors?" "Just looking out for you, dear," Sarah replied with false sweetness. "You wouldn't want to be the last to know, would you?" Lillian felt her heart race, the betrayal of Sarah's words cutting deeper than any knife. "You're vile, Sarah," she said, pushing her chair back and rising to her feet. "I'll not sit here and listen to your venom." "Lillian, wait," Clara called. But Lillian was already moving toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed to find Ethan. She needed to confront him before the rumors could take root. Outside, the world seemed brighter, but Lillian felt only darkness closing in around her. She hurried down the street, her mind racing with possibilities. What if Ethan truly had found someone else? What if he had grown tired of her, of the secrecy that bound them? The thought sent a chill through her. As she approached Ethan's home, her heart raced with a mixture of dread and determination. She could not let Sarah's words poison her mind. She had to trust in the bond they shared, in the love that had blossomed against all odds. When she reached the front door, she hesitated for a brief moment, her breath hitching in her throat. What if he wasn't there? What if she was too late? But the thought of waiting, of allowing uncertainty to fester, was unbearable. With a quick knock, she called out, "Ethan!" Her voice rang through the silence, echoing her desperation. The door swung open, and Ethan appeared, a look of surprise crossing his face. "Lillian, what's wrong?" "Can we talk?" she blurted, her heart racing as she stepped inside. The warmth of his presence was a balm to her frayed nerves, yet the weight of her fears loomed large. "Of course," he said, closing the door behind her. "You look—" He paused, concern etched on his face. "You look upset." "I am," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I need to know the truth. Are you seeing someone else?" Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? No, Lillian, of course not. Where is this coming from?" "Sarah!" Lillian exclaimed, the name spilling from her lips like venom. "She said you've been spending time with someone else, and she made it sound intimate." "Sarah's a gossip," Ethan replied, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration. "You know how she is. She twists everything." "But what if she's right?" Lillian pressed, her heart pounding. What if you've found someone else, someone who isn't complicated?" Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Lillian, I would never do that to you. I love you. You are the only one I want." She searched his eyes for the truth, and for a moment the world around them faded, yet the shadows of doubt still loomed large. "But what if everyone finds out? What if my mother—" "Your mother?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "Lillian, we can't let her dictate our relationship. We have to stand up for what we want." The intensity of his words sent a shiver down her spine, but it also ignited a spark of hope. "You really mean that?" "Of course I do," he said, his voice softening. "But we can't let others come between us. We have to be strong together." Lillian felt the weight of the world shift slightly. Perhaps they could endure the storms that lay ahead. "Then we'll face this together," she said, her voice steadier now. "But we need to be cautious. Sarah has a way of twisting things." Ethan nodded, determination etched on his face. "We'll handle it, I promise. But for now, let's not let her ruin what we have." As they stood together, the warmth of their connection wrapped around them like a protective shield. Lillian knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with Ethan by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. Yet as they embraced, a flicker of uncertainty lingered in the back of her mind. The world outside was still full of secrets, and their love, though fierce, was still vulnerable to the betrayals that lurked just beneath the surface. But for the moment, they were together, and that was enough. Together, they would navigate the storm, for love was worth fighting for, and Lillian was ready to embrace the battle ahead.